On March 7th, 2021, after a fun night at a sleepover, two young girls were rushed to the hospital, and only one of them returned home alive. The culprit? Breakfast cereal, which had traces of a toxic chemical, and it was determined that the girls may not have been the intended targets and that they were just collateral damage. I'm gonna take a deep dive into the murder of Bernice Wamala, and I will discuss the circumstances leading up to her death, as well as who was the original target and why. Bernice Wamala was born on February 28, 2018, at a Robertson House shelter, a short-term emergency women's shelter in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Her mom, Maureen Marembe, had come to Canada from Uganda in 2018, leaving behind family issues and her two older children. At the shelter, her mom had met Zara Issa, who was also pregnant, and the two became fast friends, sharing motherhood and an African background. When Issa moved to a Scarborough apartment with her new daughter, Samara, Maureen followed with Bernice a year later. They were like family, and like a family, they would spend lots of time together and visit each other's home. On March 6, 2021, Maureen, who lived in a high-rise apartment on Birchmount Road, south of St. Clair Avenue East, took her 3-year-old daughter next door to her friend Zara's apartment unit in the same building, so that Bernice could sleep over with Zara's daughter Samara. But then on the next day, on March 7, 2021, Maureen had come to pick up her daughter after receiving a call from Zara, who said that Bernice was throwing up and having some type of reaction after breakfast. When she saw Bernice had been laying in a chair and she was barely breathing. Bernice was in a weak state, and the color of her tongue was gray. Maureen even squeezed her middle finger to see if the blood was moving, but there was nothing. As well, Bernice's friend was also ill. Zara had called 911, but the operator put them in contact with a telehealth Ontario nurse, who told them to take Bernice to the closest hospital. The children were taken to Michael Garron Hospital and placed on oxygen. Bernice had 2 seizures, then her fingers, toes, and lips turned gray. After many tests and resuscitation attempts by the doctors, Bernice was taken off life support. Bernice was pronounced dead at 2:16 p.m., exactly 1 week after her 3rd birthday. Samara was treated for 4 days and survived. It turned out that Bernice and Samara had experienced symptoms of methemoglobinemia, a condition that occurs when the body is deprived of oxygen. Investigators immediately focused on what the girls ate for breakfast, which was Golden Morn, an African cereal made of corn and soya by Nestle Central and West Africa. With help from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, samples were analyzed and soon ruled out any widespread concerns with the cereal product. After months of testing, police concluded that the cereal the girls ate was deliberately contaminated. At the time of the poisoning, a 45-year-old man named Francis Ngugi had been staying over Zara's apartment. Francis was born in Kenya in 1976, where he ran his own logistics company for about 10 years. Francis also has a sister who is a Canadian citizen in Toronto. Francis had came to Toronto as a refugee from Kenya, where he faced persecution for being bisexual, such as being attacked on the street and beaten. He had come to Canada in the hopes he could be himself without fear of violence. Francis was present when Bernice was dropped off at the apartment unit, but he had then left early for work the next day at 5 a.m. And 3 months after Bernice's death, investigators had concluded that Francis was responsible for the poisoning. Francis had been arrested on June 19, 2021, and taken into custody in connection with the investigation. He was charged with 2 counts of administering a noxious substance to endanger to life, 2 counts of unlawfully causing bodily harm, and criminal negligence causing death. Homicide detectives took over the case and upgraded his charges to 1 count each of first-degree murder and attempted murder. According to statement of facts, Francis had been obsessed with Zara since meeting her at an adult learning school in early 2019. They became friends and began a romantic relationship where Francis regularly visited Zara's apartment, but she later rebuffed his advances since she still had a husband and family living in Tanzania. Francis had gone to great lengths in his obsession with Zara, digging into her history and that of her husband, who he became convinced was involved in criminal activity and was living in Tanzania under a false identity. Francis would even scour social media for mentions of her husband and would meticulously document his findings. As well as in October 2020, Francis bought a covert audio recorder and started secretly recording Zara's conversations in her bedroom. Throughout late 2020 and early 2021, Francis continued to express his love for Zara and his desire for them to be a family. He repeatedly asked Zara to marry him and be his wife, but she continued to rebuff his advances, which caused him to be further angered and obsessive, which pushed him to do the unthinkable. Francis was a janitor at a food processing company called Griffith Foods. He was promoted to sanitation lead on February 1st, 2021, and he'd recently been asked to clean 2 broken 25-kilo bags of sodium nitrite, an odorless chemical used to preserve meat. And he was warned that the chemical was toxic, and if less than a teaspoon was ingested, it would be fatal. After learning this information, Francis decided to make use of this chemical to his advantage. Francis had then stolen a quantity of the chemical and planted it in the Golden Morn cereal that Zara kept in a hand-labeled Similac baby formula container in her pantry. And he left for work early in the morning before Zara fed the children the cereal. Zara, not knowing that Francis was behind the poisoning, had called him from the hospital so that he can meet her there and be there at her time of need. While he was there, he did not mention to doctors anything about the type of chemical the girls ingested. Maybe if he did, Bernice would still be alive today. While Zara was distraught over the death of her friend's daughter, Francis continued to profess his love for her in the following months. He even contacted the Tanzanian embassy in April 2021 to report her husband as an immigrant living under a false identity in order to make it difficult for him to come to Canada. He also contacted the husband directly to say that he was in love with the man's wife, but the husband told him he knew about the affair and had already cleared it up with his wife. Zara had ended the relationship with Francis for good in May 2021, and he was arrested the following month. In court, Francis had handwritten his statement, which said, "I realize that I not only took a life, but I took away all the birthday parties. I took away the memories of her first day in school, the graduation, friendships, seeing her get married and have children. I have robbed you of all of this joy, and for that I am truly sorry. Please find a place in your heart to forgive me. Francis pleaded guilty on September 19, 2023, to second-degree murder in the death of Bernice. The sentencing hearing occurred on November 2, 2023, and then on November 3, 2023, Francis was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 17 years. And when he's freed, the refugee will be deported back to his native Kenya. Along with the life sentence, Francis was also added to a national DNA databank, given a lifetime weapons ban, and could not have any future contact with Maureen, Zara, or their families. That is all for now on this case. Let me know your thoughts on it. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I will see you next time on Melanin Mysteries.